How's it going, everybody? Today we are working again on my Honda Silverwing. We're going to be pulling a lot apart in this video, and this is going to be the baseline for rebuilding the bike as a cafe or scrambler, whatever you want to call it. Some plastics to remove, a lot of electrical and wiring to sort through and reroute, as well as some fabrication stuff. My neighbor fortunately had a little flux core welder that I can just run off the outlets in my garage, and that'll be plenty for what I need. Just some small work, and everything I weld I can grind down, so the aesthetic is not going to be compromised in that aspect. Got my angle grinder, the rest of the tools I need to start pulling this thing apart. So without any further ado, let's start getting into this rear end. So the rear seat first, it's kind of a cool design actually. It uses the key to release these two little poles, and all you do is just pull them this way and it pops the seat loose, and you're able to just pull it off just like that. The next thing then is going to be the turn signals and those wiring, as well as this inside fender liner, which is integrated with the tail light, so we're going to have to pull some wiring here too. My plan is to have a little loop that will connect to the frame back here and just round off, or maybe further up. I don't know how far up I'm going to cut it, but it'll just round it off, and there's going to be integrated LEDs which will include our rear light, brake light, tail light, whatever, as well as our turn signals, and all of that will be in one cohesive little unit that I will put in and wire up. So let's go ahead and start pulling the rest of this back end apart. So before I actually pull anything else, I am going to want to pull this bar and to help me start taking apart the back end. So I'm going to pull these plastics on both sides, and I'm also going to disconnect the battery before I go poking around with too many more wires. We'll go ahead and pull off the seat as well, and that's just a small bolt on both sides. I don't exactly know what the turn signal situation is like in terms of wiring, if there's just clips or what. But I'm going to go ahead and remove this screw here, which should hopefully allow us to see what the deal is. Okay. All right. So it looks like the connector for that is all the way up here. It comes off of this kind of shroud of wires, and that's just what runs back to the turn signal, as you can see. So I'll go ahead and disconnect it up there and pull the whole signal off. So I'm kind of playing this one by ear, but my next thought would be to pull this bolt here and then maybe get a wrench on this. So this is a 12 mil, so we'll go ahead and pull this. Okay, and feels like we're pretty sturdily connected here, so I'm going to try to get a box end wrench on that piece. So we've got to pull this up again out of the way and get a wrench here. I guess this end probably has to come off so that this piece can slide off, so I'm going to fiddle with that a little bit. So we're actually just going at this nut that's on the inside here, and I'm thinking that it should just thread out. With those side brackets off, the rest of this should just come right out. Try to keep things sorted as much as we can. But there we are, pretty naked. So the next thing we will do is going to be to pull this next inner liner, and it should just be these two small bolts up here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So a really cool thing that I enjoy about these cafe style bikes is this see-through frame. You kind of have this gap and it's all opened up, and maybe you have some pod filters on the back of your intake, whatever. But to get to that point, we are going to need to pull out the air box before anything else, and with that comes the battery box. One more 10 mil hidden back here. Oh, so all that comes. All right. So to remove the battery box, we have to pull all these other sinks and electrical connections, plugs, whatever, I believe. That seems to be what the situation here is. A lot of it can be unplugged, but a lot of it is gonna have to stay with the battery box, it looks like. All right, we'll go ahead and start pulling some bolts and screws and getting this apart. So I noticed also there's one more very, very sneaky bolt hidden way back here, and I think I have to come at it from the other side. So I'm gonna go ahead and start working on pulling the air box and then the battery box and all this electrical stuff. I thought it would be the reverse order, but we'll figure it out. We'll go ahead and pull the first pretty obvious 10 millimeter right here. And that already loosened everything up for me. I guess we got to pull some hoses. And figure out what's connected to what. And once we do that, we will be able to pull this thing out completely. So I see a hose here for sure. I see some other stuff down here. The rest of it, I think, yeah, mostly just hoses to disconnect. So just this bolt here was the only thing actually actively holding it up. So I'm just gonna pull those hoses. If you're doing this yourself and following along, just poke around, see what's connected. We're tearing it apart, and this stuff's not going back in, so it doesn't really matter how we get it out. So there was actually another bolt here which disconnected this section, and then I also had to pull off this, which is the rear brake switch. That is what activates what formerly was the brake light. And with that, now you can see that bolt back there that I was talking about, that we have to get through from this side. But this has really already opened up the bike, so I'm excited to keep going and keep pulling things apart. So now back to the battery box stuff. I've pulled all these wiring harnesses, disconnected everything. So this is all ready to go, but just when I thought this would be the most difficult bolt, this one back here, I realized, and I already put a socket on it, there's one connecting it to the coolant reservoir. So I'm gonna see if I can't get maybe some sort of extension in there and then hopefully get my socket wrench on it. Otherwise, I have no sense about how you're supposed to take that bolt off. And I think maybe the short answer is you're not supposed to. But here we are pulling it apart, so I'll let you know when I get that off. With pulling that bolt off of the coolant reservoir, it was just one of those that takes about 3 extensions and you just have to close your eyes and feel for it. But with that, the rest of this is ready to come out. I went ahead and removed this cable, which is for the starter motor that comes, you know, from the battery, and that's the rest of it. So just a little kind of a shake and a twist, and all this stuff's out of there. So now that the air box and that little secondary part are out completely, as well as the battery box and all that electrical stuff, of course, like I said, I've got some wiring to sort through in terms of how I want to route it to keep this look as minimal as possible. But I imagine I will get some sort of sheet metal and fabricate a little box here, a little tray that'll sit under the seat, which will house everything that I need, the essentials. In terms of battery relocation, maybe I'll get a smaller, lighter lithium ion and find a place to hide that. If not, I'll have to come up with something. But here's the seat. I'm gonna tuck it under there, just kind of to give you a feeling about what it might look like. I'm feeling really good about it. We'll close that gap between the seat and the tank, of course. In the back, we'll have a slightly higher final sitting position than what it currently is. But with this bar, I just kind of tucked it under. And then in terms of my rear lighting, taillight situation, turn signals, like I said, this integrated tube is going to house everything. And I think actually I'll end up cutting this portion off and just inlaying it, you know, inside of here. I think that will be what works best for me. I'll have to figure out the dimensions on that and the cuts to make. But if you don't follow my Instagram, I'll throw that up in the corner of the screen right now. It's KXNRXD_MOTO, Conrad Moto. And I post a lot of stuff on there, pictures of my bikes, what I'm working on. And if a little job's too small for me to make a whole video over, I will post it on there. And so if you like what I'm doing here, please feel free to support me there. You know, but ultimately I'm just doing this kind of as a fun thing. It's enjoyable to do, and I am going to enjoy looking back on the transformation this bike has made. So with that, I'm going to call it. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.